I would like to go through a brief synopsis of the end of Parshas Beha'aloscha, namely what happens in the sixth Aliyah, and to share some different ideas that actually on the surface sound somewhat conflicting, but hopefully be able to mesh them together and to show how it teaches us a very powerful lesson in leadership, into relating to the younger generation, and in how to inspire others, ideally, in the best possible setting. I was planning on obviously doing this video on the Dvar Torah earlier, but now everyone heard the news in Eretz Yisrael that Israel has bombed Iran, and we should all have in mind that the learning and any other good things, Torah mitzvahs we should be doing, should be l'schus the Jews in Eretz Yisrael, that they be successful, that they should be safe, and that they should be triumphant over their enemies in a complete and everlasting way, culminating with the coming of Mashiach b'mehera. Now, what happens at the end of this week's Parsha in Beha'aloscha? It says the Jews have tremendous optimism. They're about to finally leave the foot of Mount Sinai. It says that the cloud would get up, and when they knew cloud would get up from the tent of meeting, from the Oil Moed, from the tabernacle, they knew it was time to travel. And they were going to go within the span of what should have been 3 days. They were going to do in 1 day to get into Israel finally. And then things spiral. The Jews start complaining, God's pushing them too quickly, and then Hashem punishes them, and then they complain again. And a very unique complaint. They started complaining about the man that they were getting from heaven. And they said, we remember the cucumbers, we remember the melons, we remember the meat, we want steak. And at that point, Moshe has a breakdown. He says, Lama hari eisa lavdecha, lama lama tzasichen beinecha. Why are you doing this to me, God? I can't handle them anymore. Did I give birth to them that I need to handle them like this? How am I going to give them all meat? If this is if this is what my life's going to be like, if this is the lot you're giving me, hargini nahareg, kill me. If I find favor in your eyes, let me not see the bad that has befallen me. In other words, Moshe has a breakdown after hearing the constant complaints, and specifically this complaint of the Jews not wanting man and them wanting meat. This is where Moshe seems to lose it. Hashem responds to him, and Hashem says, "Esfali shivim ish miziknei Yisrael, get 70 elders from the elders of Israel, and delegate, so to say, your nevuah towards them. Give of your spirit towards them, and they will help you handle the nation." And ultimately, Moshe does this. And it says that he gave of his prophecy to the elders. By the tent of meeting, they all came to the Mishkan, and Moshe had a huddle with them. He gave of his prophecy, and they prophesied, v'lo yasafu, as Rashi explained, that they only prophesied for 1 day, and that was it. We don't hear about these 70 other prophets anywhere else later in Torah. However, the Torah continues with a final segment to this story. There were 2 people that remained in the camp. One was Eldad and one was Medad. They also had a spirit, and they started giving prophecy. One of one of Moshe's sons came and said, as Rashi says, that Eldad and Medad were giving nevuah in the Machana. Yeshua was very nervous, and standing up for Moshe, he said, incarcerate them. Why was Yeshua so nervous? So it says that Rashi says Eldad and Medad were saying that Moshe is going to die, and Yeshua will bring the Jews into the land of Israel. Moshe responds majestically to Yeshua, "You're telling me to incarcerate them? Hamakane atali, are you jealous for me that they're prophesying as well? If it was up to me, if only the entire nation of Israel would be Nevi'im, would be prophets, and that Hashem would give of His Spirit unto them." This is the story. Now there are some interesting and conflicting ideas that could be seen in this whole story. One of them, I saw in a book, Torah Me'etzion, with very brilliant essays on the weekly Parsha. And it goes as follows. It doesn't fit with seemingly every idea that's written in the Psukim, but it's a powerful idea nonetheless. These final 2 prophets, Eldad and Medad, they were prophesying. We don't know much about them. This is the first time, and I think last time, that we're hearing the name in the whole Torah. The only thing that it says about them is that these 2 people remained in the camp, Eldad and Medad, while Moshe and the other 70 Zikanim went to the tabernacle, went to the Mishkan. They remained in the camp prophesying. What were they prophesying about? That Moshe will die, and that Yeshua will bring the people into the promised land. Moshe actually seems like accepted that they were Nevi'im, heard what they said, and then the next pasuk right away is that Moshe comes back to the Machane, him and the Zekanim. So what happened over here? The explanation is like this. There was a big shift in Moshe, the way he was leading the Jewish people until now, and where the Jews were holding at this point in their history. Until now, the Jewish people were survivors. They were building up the Jewish nation. The Jews have complained for food in the past. The Jews complained for water in the past. But we don't see that Hashem was so bothered by it. The Jews weren't punished then. Hashem actually honored their requests. Hashem gave them man. Hashem gave them water. They weren't punished with calamity. Over here, though, the Jews were asking for food again, and Moshe had a breakdown. What's the difference between the earlier story and now? And the difference is, as we were just explaining, earlier the Jews were saying that we need food for survival. We can't survive. They needed basics, and they needed Hashem to provide them basics. But at this point, the Jews already had basics. At this point, they were asking for luxury and relaxation. Complaint number one, they were saying, you're pushing us too hard. We just want to relax. Complaint number two is, we want luxury. Yeah, the man's nice, but we want food, we want steak. And Moshe Rabbeinu, there was somewhat of a generational gap or a disconnect between Moshe, the ideal Moshe, who took a nation literally to a revolution to become Hashem's people, and to once the revolution starts landing, where the people start getting complacent and they want to relax and take it easy and enjoy themselves. And Moshe didn't know how to connect to that, and hence he has the breakdown saying, I don't know how to lead these people. A people that want to survive, even if they sin, even the golden calf, people make mistakes. But over here, there's such a psychological shift of going from people that are trying to build themselves to be God's people to people that want to take it easy. I don't know how to deal with this. And he takes the elders of Israel with him to the Oyel Moed. The elders of Israel are part of their elders. They're part of Moshe's generation. They also don't know how to connect to the new generation. Only Eldad and Medad are the prophets. What do we know about them? They remained in the camp. They are people that actually saw the new generation for what they are and where they were holding. And hence, what were they saying? They were saying Moshe is not going to take the Yidden into Eretz Yisrael. Moshe does not know how to connect to these people. Yes, he's idealistic, and he sees he connects to the Jewish soul very, very much. He's the teacher of Torah, but he doesn't see these people where they're at in the Machane. He's in the Oyel Moed. He's in a much more idealistic space. He brought the Zekanim into more that idealistic space, but he's not dealing with these people where they're at. Hence, they're going to need Yeshua to bring them in. Moshe Rabbeinu actually heard what Eldad and Medad were saying. Hence, in the next pasuk it says that Moshe goes back to the camp with these Zekanim. And this brings out the concept of, let's call it empathy or relatability, of the leader being able to see the people where they're practically at. However, there's a conflicting idea also in these psukim, which is, Moshe, like we said, has this breakdown. He says, where am I going to get meat for these people? Chassidus explains that when Hashem told him take the 70 elders, he was telling Moshe Rabbeinu was actually at too lofty of a space. Moshe said, I'm dealing with their souls, I'm dealing with their spirituality. To go give them meat, how am I meant to do this? Why do they even want this? To which Hashem says, you're right, from your level, the gap is too big. We need a middle level of delegating prophets to connect the dots so that they could actually get their meat from you. In other words, Moshe Rabbeinu saw a very, very ideal Jew. He saw a Jew from his highest space. He saw a Jew from his soul. A Jew that cares about nothing except for his connection to Hashem. And that's what every Jew is at his core. And that's what Moshe saw in the Jewish people. When they were asking for things so petty, he just did not know how to relate. Not because he couldn't relate, because he saw them at a much more ideal plane than they saw themselves. He saw deeper into the people than they themselves saw in themselves. Moshe wasn't not clued in. He was almost too clued in. He was clued into their souls, maybe not into the practical reality, but he was clued into their souls, saying these people are the Jewish people. Why are they complaining about having meat and melons and cucumbers? Hence, the theme of what Moshe Rabbeinu, how he held the Jews to such an esteem, continues. When Eldad and Medad were prophesying, Yeshua said, these people didn't have permission to prophesy. They're sitting in the camp. They're not sitting in the Oyel Moed. Incarcerate them. And what's Moshe's response? I wish every single Jew was a prophet. From Moshe's perspective, every single Jew was befitting to be a prophet. In fact, later on in the last book of the Torah, when Moshe is having his talk with the people before he dies, he says that you weakened me because you heard the original of the 10 Commandments from God himself, and then you said, Moshe, we can't handle it, you go up and hear it for us. And Moshe said, that crushed me. even though it says that the Jews were dying when they were hearing directly from God. But Moshe says your souls could handle this stuff. Why would you give up on being prophets and hearing from God and His Spirit directly, and you want me as the middleman? And Moshe didn't understand why they wanted to settle with mediocrity and just being normal, regular people, and not being at that plane of prophecy. In Moshe Rabbeinu's eyes, people were seen as their souls, and when they faced Moshe Rabbeinu and Moshe dealt with them, they were uplifted to their souls. So we have what sounds like two conflicting ideas in Moshe's leadership over the Jewish people. On the one hand, he saw them extremely idealistically and held them to the standard of their souls, of who they are at essence. Yet, the Torah also seems to highlight to us the necessity of not just seeing people the way they are at their essence and how they could be and their potential and who they are in their souls, but to see them also where they're at practically in their heads and psychologically, and to be able to relate to them there as well. And I think this is an important balance for us as parents, influencers, people that deal with other people and that deal with ourselves. We need to be able to run these two parallel ideas of seeing people idealistically for who they are in their soul, but at the same time not closing our eyes to where they are practically, and to try to balance those two opposites and to try to merge and harmonize who people are at essence, and to try to make that echo and fit with who they are inside and psychologically, where they're practically holding as well. To see them where they're practically holding, and even if they just seem like they want comfort and relaxation, but to try to give them meaning and purpose and to let them feel the language of their soul and who they are at their essence, even within their current state of mind. That seems to balance these two ideas. Just to finish off, I remember a beautiful letter of the Rebbe to a Israeli writer who was writing about the history of the kibbutz, which is like a communal very community-oriented small cities in Israel where everyone eats from the same kitchen and it's same-size houses, and it's like almost a bungalow colony, it seems like. And the Rebbe says that it's important, people of the first generation of the kibbutz, I'll paraphrase the letter, I believe it's to Kaddish Luz, right before Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur in the year Tafshin Chaf Gimel. And the Rebbe says the first generation of the kibbutz, if it's not careful, will lose the second generation of the kibbutz. There was going to be a generational gap. Why? Generation 1 of the kibbutz found meaning in creating the kibbutz. They were survivors. They were idealistic and trying to melt their lives away into creating this concept of a collective kibbutz. However, generation number 2, they're already born into it. So for them, the fact that they're sacrificing for something to create a kibbutz just doesn't talk to them. They already exist in that collective entity. For them, you need to give them spirituality, which focuses on the power of the individual. And there's a lot to this letter, and the letter is obviously more extensive than that. But I think this echoes very much these ideas in the Parsha about how generation number 1 usually sacrifices for a certain ideal, but then that ideal becomes the default, and people just land within themselves and are saying, okay, so now what? And then just fall into complacency or relaxation, or saying, so what does this mean for me as me? And generation number 1 needs to learn to relate to generation number 2, and to show them how what we sacrifice for still has relevance to you as you. And it's important for all of us to realize this for ourselves, for our children, for our students, to bring up next generation of Jews proud, happy, confident, and lit up in their souls and in their minds as well. May we hear good news in Eretz Yisrael, and may Mashiach come immediately.